Acts chapter 26. If you're able, would you rise to your feet as we read the word of the Lord? On one of these journeys, I was going to Damascus with the authority and commission of the chief priests. At noon, O king, as I was on the road, I saw a light from heaven, brighter than the sun, blazing around me and my companions. We all fell to the ground, and I heard a voice saying to me in Aramaic, Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? It is hard for you to kick against the goads. Then I asked, Who are you, Lord? I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting, the Lord replied. Now get up and stand on your feet. I have appeared to you to appoint you as a servant and as a witness of what you have seen of me and what I will show you. I will rescue you from your own people and from the Gentiles. I am sending you to them, to open their eyes and to turn them from darkness to light and from the power of Satan to God, so that they may receive forgiveness of sins and a place among those who are sanctified by faith in me. So then, King Agrippa, I was not disobedient to the vision from heaven. First to those in Damascus, then to those in Jerusalem, and in all Judea, and to all the Gentiles also. I preached that they should repent and turn to God, and prove their repentance by their deeds. That is why the Jews seized me in the temple courts and tried to kill me. But I have had God's help to this very day, and so I stand here and testify to small and great alike. I am saying nothing beyond what the prophets and Moses said would happen, that the Christ would suffer, and as the first to rise from the dead would proclaim light to his own people and to the Gentiles. At this point, Festus interrupted Paul's defense. You're out of your mind, Paul, he shouted. Your great learning is driving you insane. I am not insane, most excellent Festus, replied Paul. What I am saying is true and reasonable. The king is familiar with these things, and I can speak freely to him. I'm convinced that none of this has escaped his notice because it was not done in a corner. King Agrippa, do you believe the prophets? I know you do. Then Agrippa said to Paul, do you think that in such a short time you can persuade me to be a Christian? Paul replied, short time or not, I pray that not only you, but all who are listening to me today may become what I am, except for these chains. This is the word of God for the people of God. Amen. You may be seated. So what we're doing here, I know this kind of seems like, well, that's a weird, strange story for a Christmas story. What we've been doing throughout this year, we start at the beginning, and we're trying to read through the entire scriptures in a year. So hopefully some of you have kept up and you've been doing this, because reading the Bible is kind of an important thing. After all, you should probably know what it is that you profess to believe, and the Bible is a pretty good source of that information. So as we've been reading through it and following through it, God has been so faithful to guide us in all of these different aspects. And what we've come here is the end of Acts. We've come to the end of Paul's journey in the book of Acts. But to understand the end of his journey, to understand any of his journey, we have to understand where Paul came from. Now this means that we have to go back to the very beginning of Paul. And if you read the scriptures, the first time you see Paul introduced in the scriptures is around Acts chapter 8-ish, I believe, where he's first introduced. But really his story goes even further back than that. See, what we've learned in this world for every one of us, no matter what it is that we're doing, is that each one of us have a story that began somewhere else, that began earlier than this point in time. In fact, to understand each other, we have to understand our own paths, because we know that no person's story begins in this moment. So regardless where you're at, there might be just something to kind of consider as you speak to people and talk to them or whatever it is that's happening. Nobody's life begins in this moment that you're at. There's a whole lot of things that come together, and for each one of us, there are complex nuances that kind of create our life that we start to design and go as problems kind of appear to us. We build little things to fix them up and to take care of that. And as a fire comes, we either take care of the fire, or we build a firewall to keep it from going into another part of our life. And these things in our lives, that they happen one thing at a time or a couple things at a time, so much so that we kind of see it get built until we get to the point where we're at now, where someone would look at our life, they might say, you have this crazy madness that is your life, and it may be the chaos that is us, but we understand it. It's like that crazy filing system. And some of you know what I mean, because some of y'all, if you look in your file cabinets or your desks or however it is that you sort things, it makes no sense to anybody else in the world. But you've brought it together so that by design it fits your life and your chaos and your everything. And see, this is important to understand about Paul as well. But that's not even the beginning of Paul's story. See, Paul's story begins in the same place every single one of our stories begin. It begins at the very beginning. And we started this at the beginning of the year in Genesis 1:1-3. And I shared with you that these verses are kind of this perfect prologue for all of the scriptures. In Genesis 1, verses 1-3, it says, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and emptiness. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Now, if you were here then, or even maybe somewhere in between, we talked about this passage, the chaos and the emptiness. That in the Hebrew, these words are tohu and bohu, respectively. And they're very important words that lose their meaning when you convert them in English, because they're meant to depict this darkness, this ambiance of just this ominous, I don't know how to put it, just creepiness of just emptiness and chaos. This chaos and this emptiness. And because of that, there's this darkness. And every one of us understands this. Every one of us understands the tohu and the bohu, the chaos and the emptiness. And because of it, we try to bring them together. We try to find peace in our own lives. And so everything that we do becomes about bringing order to the chaos and purpose to the emptiness, about finding peace. Just this moment of being able to breathe. And as Christians, it's easy for us to say, well, what I do is I go to church and we say, well, Jesus is the Prince of Peace. And then we can say our amens, and we can say things like, I just put all my hope and my trust in Him, and in Jesus I find my peace. And it sounds wonderful, and it makes for a great bumper sticker, but the reality is that simply turning to Jesus doesn't make everything evil or chaotic go away. Because we turn to Jesus, we come to church, and I think a lot of us wonder, how is it that our lives are still messed up outside when we come to church? Because everybody else's seem to be hunky-dory. But mine is just kind of falling apart, or I'm still trying to shore up these pieces that are falling apart. And so as we go through life, as we go through these nuances of this happens and I know how to fix it, and I know how to handle this problem now, and I know how to handle this problem, I think our lives kind of become like that old rickety pickup that most of us had in high school. You know, the one that only you know how to turn on. You kick it right, and you had to wiggle the key just right, and then touch the two wires till you got the starter going, and you had to pump it exactly 4 times, knock on the hood like 3 times. Like, you figure out these things, and people are like, why don't you just get a new vehicle? Well, it's all I have. And the same thing with our lives. Why don't you get a new life? It's all that I have. And I know how to run it. I know how it works. I know how to kick it in the morning to get it going. I know how many times to pump the gas. I know how to do this. And it may seem chaotic to you, but it's how I have structured it so that this thing will work for me. It's how I find my peace. And we start to define peace more in ways of my ability to mitigate my life. That's how we define peace. My ability to mitigate my life, or my ability to fix the problems in my life and put firewalls up so that this problem doesn't interfere with this problem, doesn't interfere with this problem. And I can just kind of keep it together long enough to survive life. And we do everything we can because of how much work we've put into it to protect that peace, to protect that way of doing. I remember loaning my truck to people, and they'd go to start, I'm like, don't pump it 6 times, only 5. Because if you pump it 6, it's flooded. Right, and that's how you all know what I'm talking about. You had the same truck, didn't you? Yeah. The one that your friends had to push. No one wanted to ride shotgun because they were the first to push. Yeah, we were all there. But because of that, the reality is we try to protect our peace. We try to protect all these things that we have in our lives to satisfy maybe our spouse, and to protect our marriage, and by making sure that we do these little things that take care of it, to keep peace with our kids. We try to choose our battles, or try to make them happy while still trying to absorb all of the pain that comes in life for them, because we don't want our babies to hurt, or just to secure our finances, because this is a big deal in life. We have to eat, and food is not free by any means, and then our finances become this big deal. Finances are so big that finances are the number one cause of divorce in America. So we want a secure job, and we want one that makes enough money, and you know what, my job may not be what I like, it's not ideal, but it pays the bills, and it pays for the lifestyle that either I've chosen or the lifestyle that I feel obligated to live, because that's what I'm supposed to do if I have a family in this day and age. And so we try to keep peace with maybe your in-laws, or your family, or your friends, or just the world around you. Everything. Keeping and protecting peace, if you think about it, probably consumes the majority of your life. And we do a lot of things to protect peace in our lives. And as a result, like I said, we become very defensive, even fearful or angry when someone challenges the way we bring peace into our life. And we can become just plain resistant to anything, and that might shake up any little bit of peace that we've managed to create. That this, maybe like we live in this house of cards that it holds together just fine if you don't mess with it. But if you touch that, it's all going to fall apart, and that's going to touch that and that. And I don't have time to fix my life, so I need you to stay out of it. And And that's how a lot of us live today. This has a lot to do with Paul, believe it or not. Paul was this great Jew who did everything he could to live this life. He's got this relationship with this God Yahweh. And for Paul, maybe it wasn't an ideal relationship. I try to keep this law, and it's not really good at doing it. And some Jews aren't as good as other Jews. But you know what? We've kind of worked this thing out, me and God. I do my part. He does his part. It's not a wonderful dance. Sometimes we step on each other's toes. But at least we know what we're doing, and we've kind of got it going. And it seems to kind of work with my life. And then for Paul, he was doing this. I had it going on. This was supposed to look like. And then come these Christians. And they start ruining everything with changing it around, saying that it's not about the law, but it's about grace, and it's about obedience out of love. And this Christ that came, who was supposed to be this great warrior, instead becomes this Jesus who dies on a cross, an act of shame, of despicableness. This can't be it. And you're going to go around and you're going to worship that shameful person who died on a cross. He lost. Do you get it? He lost. You're going to go around and try to tie him to my God. I will not have that. You take your crazy, ridiculous, hippie, radical ways and get them out of here. And for Paul, this is who he was. So he comes up here before Agrippa. He says, this is what I did, and I felt justified doing it. I had to protect my way of life. He said in verse 9, I too was convinced that I ought to do all that was possible to oppose the name of this Jesus of Nazareth. Because Jesus of Nazareth threatened the peace that I knew. He threatened this house that we had built so hard. This house that's always being threatened, but we as the people of God have managed to hold up. They threatened it, and I had to stop them with all that I was. And he was passionate about this. In verse 10 it says, and that is just what I did in Jerusalem. On the authority of the chief priests, I put many of the saints in prison. And when they were put to death, I cast my vote against them. And it drove him to seek peace at any cost. I don't care what it is, what I have to do. These people must be stopped. Many a time I went from one synagogue to another to have them punished and tried to force them to blaspheme. In my obsession against them, I even went to foreign cities to persecute them. Do you hear what he's saying? In my obsession against them. See, when our peace, when our way of life, our precious house of cards, when it's threatened, we can act in some extreme ways that seem justifiable to us. That at the time make sense, and we may even defend so much because I've already done it, I've already invested in it, and I'm going to defend my actions. I need to take on more work because that's how I have to handle this. Or you know what, me and my family, we deserve a break, and so we're going to finance a vacation. We can't afford it, but we're going to go, and we're going to do this anyway because we need a break, we need some time. And I can't take care of this, so I'm going to take on a second mortgage because that'll get me kind of caught up, and I'll figure out a plan later because right now I'm on fire, and I don't have time to worry about anything else. Or we make, even as youth, we can make some really ridiculous choice, and I'm going to drop out of school for the sake of working. Or I'm going to end this problem, this attack with more violence. And I'm going to answer this like that, and I'm going to take care of this like that, and I'm going to take care of my kids by making sure they think I'm their best friend. Because if my kids think I'm their best friend, then everything's going to be great. And let me tell you something. In any instance where the parents tried to be their kid's best friend, they failed their children in every instance, and they always will. Your kids don't need a friend, they need a parent. And we say, no, you don't get it. It's justifiable. My situation is different. I have to protect it. This is how Paul was trying to secure his peace. By fighting against anything that threatened it with everything that he had. That is, until he received this revelation. Ironically, he received this revelation on his way to secure peace in the name of God. Acts 26, beginning in verse 14 says, we all fell to the ground, and I heard a voice saying to me in Aramaic, Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? It's hard for you to kick against the goads. And then I asked, who are you, Lord? He said, I'm Jesus, whom you're persecuting, the Lord replied. In his quest to secure peace in the name of God, Paul had inadvertently become a persecutor of God. I want you to think about that for a second. Because that translates into every single part of your life, whether you realize it or not, whether you want it to or not. Becoming so concerned with maintaining peace, very often we end up actually destroying everything we were trying to save in the first place. When I become the parent who just wants to have this great relationship with my child because I'm afraid of losing them, that I become their friend. When they mature, they realize that I was never any good to them as a parent, the one role they needed. When I try to solve all of my problems with money, and I just need more money to take care of this, to buy this, to live this lifestyle, to do this, I end up creating more problems in my life. In many aspects of our life, our pursuit of peace, tragically and ironically, becomes the very thing that causes unrest and just destruction in our lives. We become like the insecure junior high boy who's so afraid of losing his girlfriend, I'm not saying any names, that he smothered her until she finally left him. And it's really easy for us to look at that guy and say, duh. But seriously, how often do we do that exact same thing? How often do we do that in our own lives? Become so concerned with our pursuit of peace that we act irrationally and don't even realize it. You probably see this a lot in the lives of others because it's easy to see it in other people's lives. Those who work so hard just to spin their wheels, to have their lives fall apart anyway. Like the gambler who keeps doubling down, saying, I've lost this time, but if I just double down, then I might win. And if I lose, it's no big deal because I'll just double down again until eventually luck's got to turn and it comes my way. And when it does, I'll double down enough that it finally at least breaks even until we end up digging a hole so deep and so far that we're enslaved by our ways of life. It happens in our relationships, in our finances, in our health, even in our religion. And this is what God was pointing out to Paul. He says, you're so obsessed with protecting me, you don't even consider the reality around you. That you're actually destroying this thing that you sought so hard to protect. And Paul wound up kicking against the goads. It's something you don't hear very often anymore. And it simply means that he was doing something that was working against him, that was bringing him pain. Where I come from, we call it spitting in the wind, or spinning your wheels. Doing something that's only going to frustrate your time and your energy. And this is what I want us to notice. See, I know this without knowing anything else, that every one of us struggle to bring order and purpose out of the tohu and bohu in our lives. It's just simply true of everyone. And we've all attempted many things to keep peace in all of our lives. And every one of us have failed at one point or another. And if you're sitting there thinking, no, I've never failed, then you are either a liar or you are naive of the reality around you. Because we've all been in that boat. Unfortunately, it may be the one commonality that we all have in life. Look at Paul's situation. This guy was arrested falsely after they threatened to kill him, and then they plotted an assassination against him. His very life was threatened. He was forced to appeal to Caesar just to save his life. But that's like jumping out of the frying pan into the fire, because when he goes to see Caesar, this is certainly going to end in death anyway. And so he's drugged to Rome with no hope of getting out of this mess. And he stands here before King Agrippa and Festus, a couple of corrupt leaders who simply bring Paul in because he's a fun thing to talk about. I mean, when you stand there thinking of Paul, listen, Paul in this scene, he is the consummate example of what we think unrest must look like. His life is falling apart. There's no way to fix this. Fires are around him. And he should be panicking. He should absolutely be in just survival mode. You don't get in any worse of a situation than this. And so he begins by sharing with Agrippa why he changed everything about his life and his beliefs. And he tells him, he says, I was like everybody else. I fought against all those things that threatened the life that I knew. Doing the things that everyone else did in order to create peace and purpose in my life. He says, but God himself spoke to me and asked me why I was working against him. To be more specifically, he asked me why I was working so hard to hurt myself and everyone around me. So he says, I stopped fighting God in order to protect my religion and decided instead to ride the wave that I was so afraid of. See, this is where I think so many of us are at. We're so afraid to depend on God because our house of cards may not be ideal, and it may be just one light breeze from falling apart, but it's standing right now. And my mom always told me, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So Jesus, you sound awful fine, but don't come near my house of cards because you have this way of grabbing things and destroying them. And we'll never say that out loud, but that's how we feel about God. It's all hunky-dory that everyone does it, but don't do it too much. Don't bring too much into it. Don't go too far over the edge. Jesus, all fine and dandy to supplement your life, but this is the real world. And in the real world, people are dying. People are getting sick. People get cancer out of nowhere. People lose their jobs and we lose our homes. People start to die. Marriages get divorced. Kids run off and they do the wrong things and then they die and it's just not right. And this is the real world. So Jesus, just stay away from my house of cards. That's the reality of how we live. So many of us act. And what Paul is saying, that's what he was telling me, that we're doing that, but we didn't realize is I was destroying my family. That because I was so busy trying to protect this house of cards, at the end of the day, I was the one that entrapped my children. I was the one that destroyed my marriage. I was the one that destroyed my finances. I was the one that did all of these things in this world because these things are happening in the wrong way. Because I'm relying on the wrong stuff. I'm looking to myself for peace. And to be fair, the reason I look to myself is because I know me. I know my concerns are for me. I know I'm going to look out for me. I'm not sure how I feel about you, God. And I'll be honest with you. I think we're afraid that we're going to end up like Paul if we follow Jesus. Standing there with fires all the way around you and handcuffed before an enemy who's doing nothing more than making fun of you, making a mockery of your life. I pray you would be so blessed. I want to read you this last part. I want to read this from the Message. I love the Message sometimes. It's such a beautiful way to put the scriptures. That was too much for Festus. He interrupted with a shout, Paul, you're crazy. You've read too many books, spent too much time staring off into space. Get a grip on yourself. Get back into the real world. But Paul stood his ground. With all respect, Festus, your honor, I'm not crazy. I'm both accurate and sane in what I'm saying. The king knows what I'm talking about. I'm sure that nothing of what I said sounds crazy to him. He's known all about it for a long time. You must realize that this wasn't done behind the scenes. You believe in the prophets, don't you, King Agrippa? Don't answer that. I know you believe. But Agrippa did answer. Keep this up much longer and you'll make a Christian out of me. Paul, still in chains, said, that's what I'm praying for, whether now or later. And not only you, but everyone listening today to become like me, except, of course, for this prison jewelry. See, Paul wasn't wishing anything bad upon Agrippa. And I wish we would get that God's not wishing anything bad upon you when he says, follow me. When he says, do what I'm ordering you to do, what I'm commanding you to do. He's actually telling this guy, this person who's sitting there, who seems to have everything in life that we want. Because if we're to look at this just on paper, every one of us, I think that most of us would say, I want to be in Agrippa's position. I want to be the one with the power. I want to be the one who gets to make the decision. I want to be the one who has the money. I want to be the one who has the house, who has security, who has all of these things. Agrippa is the one who has everything that we need to have. He's the one who's winning this game, and I want to be like Agrippa. That way I can have peace. And Paul's telling this guy, I really wish that instead you could feel like I do. Because you're doing everything like everyone else thinks it should be done, and in reality, it's making you miserable. Paul was standing there in chains before men who were much more powerful, rich, and technically free than he was. And yet I submit to you today that Paul was the only person in that room who was experiencing true peace. You see, my prayer for us is that we would get it. That we would allow it to click. We can say it, we know it's true, but we're afraid. I'm afraid that if I do this, then it might not work. And so many of us settle for having this house of cards that may collapse at any moment, rather than simply saying, I'm going to live in God's presence. And I get it. Listen, I get it. I'm a father. I'm a husband. I have children. I know the reality that my babies may travel down paths that I don't want them to travel down. I get that bad things might happen in my life. I get that I might lose my job, that we may end up on the street. All of this stuff is very real. I get that. But I have this peace that I just want you to know. See, I'm at peace. I wish we would all feel that way. Because at the end of the day, I just leave it to God. You see, it was God alone whose Spirit hovered over the tohu and the bohu in the beginning and brought order and purpose from the chaos and the emptiness. It was God, not me, not you, not your good intentions, not your love for others, none of those things, that spoke and light came from the darkness. That was God. And I pray that we would get that. I want to invite Marlene and Rhonda to come up. And this year, friends, it's we go into this new year and we make new resolutions, and we go and we do Christmas and we pass out our gifts and our upgrades on our iTunes cards or whatever it is that we're giving away, magazine subscriptions. I don't know. My prayer for you is that you would seek real peace. I get that every one of you has a story that I can't possibly understand, that I have no right to speak into. But I know this, that you live in the real world where there is chaos and there's emptiness. I know this, that your struggle in life is to find peace for yourself, for your children, for your families, for your work, for whatever it is. We're all doing that. And I know that because you're human. Every person's like that. You're not alone. But I also know that you're never going to find it unless you just submit to Christ. Unless you're willing to say that no matter what happens, what's going on in my life, I'm going to lean on you, God. I'm going to trust you. I'm going to give it to you. And I'm not sure for the future. I'm not sure for my babies. And it scares me to death because I know how much I love them, and I'm afraid that maybe you don't love them as much as I do. Or that maybe you're not going to willing to go that extra step like I would for them. But He will. And if anyone has proven that in this world, it has been God. You see, what we celebrate on Christmas isn't the birth of Jesus who came into the world just to die for our sins. But what we celebrate on Christmas is that God Himself said, I love you so much, I'm going to step up to the plate for you. There's no other religion in the world that has that, because you can't make this up. That's how much God loves you. How much He's willing to do this for you. So what I want to do now, we're going to do communion, and instead what I want to do is I want to invite you to come down. There are some here today who I know are wrestling with peace. Who are wrestling with finding true peace in God. Who say, yeah, I believe in God and that's good and that's fine and that's good enough. You don't have to do all of this stuff. I don't know who told you that. They lied to you. If I'm married to somebody, I really do have to act like I love them and be with them and do that. That's what happens if I truly love someone and I'm with them. God loves you and He wants you. So if you're struggling with peace, I want to open these altars up now and just invite you to come down and to be praying and just to submit it to God and let God do the work that He's doing in you. Come on down to the altars. Come down and bring your burdens to Him. Bring your chains to Him. And say, it's horrible, God. Sometimes life is just miserable. I'm going to leave it to you. So that when I stand before those who mock my life, when I stand before those who threaten to take it all away, those who say, I'm in charge now, I have the power to do this, I can stand there in peace and say, no, you don't. Because Jesus truly is the Prince of Peace. There are some here who haven't even made that full step, who haven't decided that they're truly going to follow God anyway. I love what the kids did this morning because they spoke the simplest truth of the message. That God offers you that free gift. And I know that everyone here wants that. There's not a parent in this place who doesn't want better for their children. And yet every one of us, I know because I'm one of them, says, that's fine, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to be in a hurry to take care of it, to make sure that they get to practice. I'm going to do that job. I'm going to provide for them. I'm going to work, and I'm going to give up friendship and relationships so I can take care of my kids. I'm going to do whatever it takes and be the best at everything, be the good kid, so that I can take care of my family. And that whole time, God stands there with that free gift saying, I'm right here. This gives you all the time in the world. It gives you an eternity. Do you get that? It gives you real peace. It brings you life. It fulfills everything that you are. Because whether you choose to believe in God or not is irrelevant. He created you. for one purpose, to be in a relationship with Him. And if you're not, you're miserable, period. You may not even know it. I was a junkie for 10 years. I didn't even know I was miserable. But you are. You want to know true love, know Christ. Come down and let Him be your Lord. This gift awaits you. Keep building that house of cards. You might make it through life without it falling. But that doesn't mean that you succeeded. It means you bucked the system. But you left this life with a house of cards as a legacy. So look at those you love and let them know, I'm leaving you a house of cards, because that's the reality of it. Father, we need you in so many ways. I pray that we would seek your peace. As the way is well up and life comes, Father, may we find our peace